EU countries from 25th of April plan to impose additional restrictions on Russian LNG and energy, all the way to imposing a complete ban on such supplies in 2028. In this regard, I've already instructed the government to evaluate the possibility of stopping energy supplies to the European market without waiting for the door to be shut in our face. And those volumes will be shifted to other markets that are more interesting and promising to us. Right now, the market situation is developing in such a way that if we make this transition right now, if we shift to markets that really need increased supplies, we will get a stable foothold there in markets where there is reliable demand and where there are reliable long-term relations. The states that are building long-term relations with Russia, constructive relationships with Russia.
I asked you together today to discuss the situation in global energy markets, to compare notes. And I would like to hear your opinion regarding the events that are currently unfolding and to consult with you on how we can best coordinate the efforts of the state and our private companies in light of these ongoing developments. Let's also discuss, in this regard, Russia's further actions in the global energy sector as a whole, including and taking into account the worsening of the situation, as we understand it, in the Middle Eastern region. Russia has, on numerous occasions, I would like to immediately point out, warned that attempts to destabilize the situation in the Middle East would inevitably undermine the stability of the global fuel and energy complex, raise oil and gas prices, limit the supply of these vital resources worldwide, and would certainly disrupt long-term investment plans. Judging by all appearances, that's exactly what's happening. Today we are observing significant logistical challenges along hydrocarbon transportation routes, and we can clearly see that this is having a profoundly negative impact on global production and indeed on global supply chains. It is striking at industry, and in essence, without any exaggeration whatsoever, it is affecting the entire framework of international economic relations, because supply disruptions lead to other purely economic problems. Inflation is rising, and production, not only of oil and gas, but also the manufacturing of industrial goods is suffering. Let me remind you that in the past year, approximately 1/3 of the entire global seaborne oil exports passed through the Strait of Hormuz, which amounted to around 14 million barrels every single day. Of that substantial volume, nearly 80% was specifically destined for various nations within the broader Asia-Pacific region. At this very moment, this absolutely critical shipping route is now practically shut down. Oil production, which is tied to the use of the strait, risks completely stopping already in the coming months. It has already begun to decline. Storage facilities in the region are filling up with oil that is impossible to export, or very difficult to export, or very expensive to export. It's quite clear that a complete rerouting of all Middle Eastern oil supplies without using the Strait of Hormuz is, at this moment, and certainly for now, simply unrealistic. Adjusting the logistics will not only consume a considerable amount of time, but also necessitate substantial expenditures on infrastructure, the expansion of maritime terminals and so forth, and naturally it will be accompanied by significant political risks, which, by the way, have not disappeared at all. Yet consumers need oil right now, today. Consequently, world oil prices are increasing, and we are perfectly aware of this. In just the last week alone, they've gained more than 30%. I checked today around 5:30 a.m. Moscow time, and it had already surpassed over $119 per barrel. Then it was 107, 109, 106. Now I believe Igor Alexeyevich mentioned 103, and it's currently fluctuating around that figure. But still, fluctuations persist, and this trend is not towards a decrease, but rather towards an increase. A very similar situation is also unfolding in the global gas market. Supplies of liquefied natural gas from the Middle East have sharply contracted. Production capacities in that region have significantly declined, and their full restoration will take not just weeks, but potentially even months. It's impossible to quickly compensate for the lost volumes. As a result, global gas prices are also rising, I believe, even faster than oil prices. What I would like to emphasize in this connection, under current conditions, competition among buyers for energy resource suppliers is intensifying. Pause for ensuring stable, predictable deliveries of oil and gas. And in this regard, of course, I must mention and remind not only the colleagues present here in this hall, but also all our consumers that Russian energy companies have always been distinguished precisely by their stability. It is evident that the global logistics of the fuel and energy complex, in light of the continuing conflict in the Middle East, will inevitably undergo changes, shifting towards more advantageous and promising markets. Furthermore, it is crucial to comprehend that the current elevated prices for raw commodities are, without a doubt, inherently temporary in nature. This is something we both fully grasp. This is a clear and undeniable fact. We need to take this as our starting point. That is why I requested your presence here to consult with you on how we ought to coordinate our efforts in the coming period. The alteration in the equilibrium of hydrocarbon supply and demand will undoubtedly result in a new sustainable price reality. This will inevitably happen, so it is crucial for Russian energy companies to seize this current moment, including to channel their additional export earnings towards reducing to direct them towards alleviating their debt burden, their liabilities to domestic banks. Esteemed colleagues, I would like to particularly draw your attention to this important point. I am asking the government and the central bank to take this entire process under control. I must stress, Russia is, and I'll say it once more, a reliable provider of energy resources. That has always been true. We will certainly continue to supply oil and gas to those nations that themselves prove to be reliable counterparties. I refer not only to our partners in the Asia-Pacific region, but also to the states of Eastern Europe, such as Slovakia and Hungary. Even now my colleagues, even before this broad-ranging meeting, have already informed me that we are significantly increasing our deliveries to our reliable partners. And what's more, across multiple regions worldwide. At the same time, I want to remind you that the countries of the European Union are planning to introduce additional restrictions on the purchase of Russian hydrocarbons, including liquefied natural gas, starting from April 25th, leading up to a complete ban on such supplies by 2027. In this connection, the government has already been assigned the task to evaluate the possibility and feasibility of halting the deliveries of our energy resources to the European market. Rather than waiting for the door to be slammed in our faces, we should do it right now and redirect these volumes from the European market to more promising directions. And what's most important, to establish ourselves there. The current market situation is developing in such a way that if we reorient ourselves right now to the markets that require an increase in their supplies, we can now firmly establish ourselves there. That is to say, in places where there is a steady long-term demand and dependable relationships of a lasting nature towards those nations that are actively building constructive business connections with Russia. By the way, I specifically requested your presence here today so that we could thoroughly discuss and consult on all these important matters. If European companies, if buyers suddenly decide to reorient themselves and ensure us long-term stable joint cooperation free from political considerations, completely rid of political influence, please, we have never refused
We are ready to work with Europeans too, but we need some clear signals from them that they are prepared and also willing to work and will ensure for us this steadfastness and stability.
The government is also keeping these matters under its control, and it is precisely at this moment, concerning all these important issues, that I truly hope we will have a very substantive discussion.